Okay, let's do a Tusha recommendation. We're updated on Bricks and Minifigs. Felt more like a recap than anything else, really. But we have a Tusha recommendation from Hana Cleo.
When we see someone exhibit...
That's in the wrong browser. That is in the wrong browser. Politeness invites cruelty. The hidden cost of polite society.
When we see someone exhibiting dominating traits or behavior, when you meet someone who has asserted dominance in front of you, I think we tend to label them as controlling.
She's got that fuzzy look.
Greedy, tyrannical, intimidating,
Okay.
not someone you can trust. So dominant.
The dominant? You can't trust them? Depends. If we're talking like used car salesman energy trying to railroad you, then yeah, but...
is the willingness to assert yourself and hold your position when someone else's interest is working against yours. So you prioritize your interest and refuse to back down from that position. Dominance can also show up as force. Some
Yeah, mostly. When people are like, I hate that, normally that's what it is,
someone
yeah.
threatens you, a country going to war, a business crashing a competitor. It can also show up as a refusal, or when you say no, or when you refuse to move on. A decision you won't reverse no
Dominance is saying no.
matter how much pressure
That one, sure.
comes back at you. Or you are willing to achieve something with force, manipulation and even violence. So when we describe someone as dominant, it can be a specific behavior they exhibit in a situation, like a specific act in a specific moment, a decision, exchange, or refusal. A generally submissive person can still produce a dominant behavior in one specific moment. But if it's a stable disposition...
This is painful. Tusha, why did you do this to us?
It can be a personality trait, like a general tendency. Like someone just has a dominant personality.
Sure.
This is kind of easy.
Very willful. Willful, it sounds like you're describing.
To understand just by observing people and situations.
Willful, stubborn.
You hear things online where people, try to teach high position people how to dominate a room by not believing in hierarchical orders and mentality.
I don't personally, I'm not familiar with that. But...
those kind of things. But if we don't put all those human judgments to it for a moment, all the labels, controlling, tyrannical, and so on, this trait exists in the natural world too.
Okay.
In behavioral biology, evolutionary biologists introduced...
When the fucking ape steals the other ape's baby to force them to do what they want. Very dominant.
The concept of resource holding potential, RHP, when observing animals. And before a fight happens, animals size each other up and looking at things like body size, strength, horns, claws, and so on. And based on that, each one is making a calculation. Can I actually win this fight? And
is this going to be Peterson Pelf?
Biologists give this calculation a name, resource holding potential. This measures an animal's total capacity to win a fight.
Have I been tricked into watching a tutorial on one of those games Hexathian likes? Some sort of
It
RPG
applies to
guide?
both the attacker and the defender. So it says a stable system in nature comes down to both sides being able to calculate the risks in advance. So whichever side has more of this capacity, more RHP, is the more dominant one in the situation. Often, the weaker side just backs off instead of confronting further when they feel it's not worth the risk. Now, if we're back to talking about individuals, when it comes to human interactions, social frictions are unavoidable. I think because of this, we tend to view dominance as something entirely negative because we try to separate, standing your ground from being dominant. We like to think that protecting a principle is a completely different behavior. But that's not true.
I disagree. But carry
When you
on.
stand firm on a principle and refuse to back down, you are prioritizing your position over someone else's. You are being dominating. The other person doesn't get what they wanted, whether that's an outcome, a
I disagree that dominating is the correct term there.
decision, or just being right about something. We judge the behavior of dominating by how it looks and how it feels like, not by what it actually is. A strongly held bad principle and a strongly held good principle can look the same on the surface. Now, both create friction, and we mistake that friction for evidence that someone did something wrong. Now, imagine
What are you fucking...
someone who
Okay, give me an
refuses
example.
to change their position no matter how much pressure they get. Now ask yourself, do you call that person principled or domineering?
Personally, neither. Stubborn.
The behavior is identical either way.
Potentially retarded, depending on what I think the principle is.
What actually decides the label is whether you agree with the position they are defending. So if it supports what you want, it looks like a firm principle. If it creates friction or makes you uncomfortable, it comes across as domineering. Stubbornness or
Stubbornness would be the more accurate one. You're stubborn whether it's good or bad, though. Domineering is not this.
Or control.
Domineering is not defensive.
we tend to judge the behavior by how it looks on the surface, right? We evaluate whether an assertion is acceptable based on our immediate emotional impression. When you choose to stand your ground, a strongly held bad principle and a strongly held good principle look exactly the same from the outside. And when
Isn't your entire point that it doesn't?
you are
Depending on your feelings about that
protecting
principle?
a principle or making an assertion, it creates interpersonal tension. The discomfort is hard to deal with. We assume that if something feels tyrannical, it must actually be tyrannical. That's the mistake. The feeling and the fact are not the same.
Now we have tyrannical. Tyrannically refusing to give up their principles. I don't...
thing. But why does it
I'm not feeling it.
feel tyrannical in the first place?
What the
A part of it might be our own uncertainty. Most of us are unsure about a lot of things. So when someone displays that kind of certainty and unshakable position, it can feel unsettling, almost like an accusation aimed at our own doubt. But that
No.
reaction becomes a cost for you, right? Every time you defend a position or protect a principle, you risk being read as domineering. So people learn to adjust their public presentation to avoid the risk, to avoid the social cost, the friction, the tension, discomfort they
Okay.
create. I think people
I get where she's going now. Horrible, horrible, horrible use of words. Bring it back to the animal thing. She's saying they're calculating if it's worth it to clash with you. They're judging your your stubbornness RHP,
who want to
and they decide it's not worth challenging to begin with if they think they can't win. Yeah.
act ethically internalize this very deeply, right? They are highly sensitive to the friction they cause. Because when you want to be fair, right, causing discomfort feels like that you are doing something wrong. Or
I would suggest though already. We'll see where she goes with this. I would suggest the pressure to behave that way isn't you sizing up your individual opponent. It matters more the audience and surrounding social situation. I think directly that other person who you might be challenging is less important.
unethical. So they voluntarily pull back their assertions to avoid looking like the villain. But this doesn't happen to everyone the same way, right? Certain individuals are completely unaffected by the social cost of
Timur, the dragon fruit sorbet was a banger from Lidl. It's fucking sick. Yeah. Normally dragon fruit flavored stuff doesn't taste of jack all. That tastes real good. I want to say it tastes like a combo of like kiwi and banana. It's really good. Someone said the lychee sorbet is good as well.
Creating friction. They are less sensitive to interpersonal tension. Some people don't even notice when their actions cost someone else something. Some notice, right? And it just doesn't factor into their decision, so they don't care. They're fine with the awkwardness. They're fine with the.
It's so broad. I'm struggling to come up with hypothetical examples that I think would fit what she's talking about. What the fuck is this?
Friction. Fine with being called controlling or worse. So the disapproval of dominance doesn't actually remove it from the world or its environment. It just filters out.
Trying to imagine a situation where you are sticking to a principle and other people view that as controlling.
The people who felt the cost and backed off. So the people who never felt.
I can think of maybe political opinions that involve mandating labor of others, but I do not think she's talking about this.
Felt that cost, get to keep all of it, which means the power to hold a firm position ends up in their hands. So people who choose dominance over principle will dominate their ways anyways. And this often results in social suppression, hierarchy, and conformity. So far, this has been about individuals, but the same reaction, can play out at a much larger scale. Now, if the public reacts negatively to any strong assertion of presence, domineering tendencies,
this also feels. Now, call me crazy. This feels highly Asian.
The social and political landscape begins to reward a people-pleasing presentation. So this is especially true in democracy.
But this is not. I do not think this is for an Asian audience, but this feels very much like an Asia-centric perspective. Like nail that sticks up gets hammered down kind of
countries and cultures, where leaders actually depend on public approval. So over-polished diplomacy becomes the default. Public figures learn to speak in vague terms, soften every statement, and perform uncertainty they might not even feel. It becomes safer to sound unclear than to sound firm.
I'm feeling it. Is this video meant to be meta?
Never get a straight answer. An environment where vague diplomacy is the norm could eventually malfunction. When everything is softened to avoid friction, the system loses its ability to handle concrete problems or establish clear directions. And sometimes when continuous ambiguity creates exhaustion, people get so tired of the vagueness that they swing to the opposite extreme.
Oh no!
Entirely.
This better not be an Orange Man bad video. I better not have been baited into an Orange Man bad video.
The public aversion to dominance reverses entirely. The culture shifts to worshipping figures who appear to exhibit force with no restraint.
Oh no!
So people stop
tricked me.
asking whether the person's principles are actually fair or ethical. They accept the dominance because a rigid, certain stance feels like relief after so much vagueness. There's a concept for this, right? You probably heard before, especially given the current political climate. It's called the paradox of tolerance. The argument goes...
Sorry, there's a term for society getting sick of vagueness to the point where they prefer someone who's brash and domineering, regardless of their actual principles. There's a term for this, the paradox of tolerance. I don't think that's what that is. Paradox of tolerance is you can't tolerate the intolerant. Yes?
Society must be intolerant of intolerance to survive. Unlimited tolerance ultimately allows intolerant ideologies to dominate.
How does this follow?
Destroy and erode the tolerant society itself. So whether that argument fully holds up is its own debate. But when a culture suppresses the willingness to stand firm, it gives up its own ability to push back. By prioritizing immediate emotional comfort and filtering out true assertion, the environment loses its defensive stability. The effort to eliminate dominance ends up creating the exact conditions for its most extreme form to take over. And the people who suppress their own assertion, their own dominance, in order to look fair, open, and reasonable, often end up with the least defense when something without any of those qualities comes along. Another thing to note is that cruelty,
Sure, don't be a pussy.
corruption, aggression, violence, abuse,
I like a culture of conflict.
injustice, these things are inherently dominant forces. So each one by nature brings pain, suffering, or deprivation to someone. And because of that, none of them can exist on their own or exist by consent. Nobody willingly signs up to be harmed, which means for any of them to exist, to persist, to expand, they have to be imposed. So they have to operate in a dominating manner. So there's no other way for them to survive. Because these traits are fundamentally dominant, they don't self-limit. They don't stop out of some desire for balance. If they don't meet an equal opposing force, if you don't dominate back, they become the default state of the environment. So being passive does not neutralize them. You get ruled by them instead.
Surely all the passive boys get nuked though. There's mimetic selection.
So,
as you
for
already
example,
sort of described.
if you don't use dominance to oppose war, your outcome is decided entirely by how war operates itself.
Oh god, it's just that you can't stay neutral in a moving train video, isn't
So the
it?
people who train themselves
Ultimately,
to avoid social friction and prioritize emotional comfort, who soften or pull back their own assertion to avoid looking like the villain, often become the victims who suffer under forces that are dominant by nature. You cannot outweigh
the weak get owned.
cruelty, and you cannot
The weak get owned.
out-reason corruption into stopping on its own. You also can't resist conformity or social hierarchy by staying out of the friction. Right? Both are inherently dominant systems. They exert constant structural pressure to make people fall in line. If your only
Sure.
strategy is to avoid
Sure.
tension and stay comfortable, you will fall in line too eventually. To hold an
Yeah, that's true.
independent identity and a mind against mindless group mentality, you have to be willing to risk the social cost of standing alone.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to dominate, even if it means being seen as the villain. Of course, how you do it still matters, right? Being dominant doesn't excuse being cruel.
The way she's phrasing it and what she's focusing on is the consequences.
That's not what I'm advocating here, right? That's another subject. I think what the world actually lacks is people who care about justice, treating others well, and are still willing to be dominant. I just think we need
dark woke.
more people like that in real life, in politics, in pretty much every field.
Right. But surely their dominance, based on your descriptions prior, would be inherently damaging to others. Is that just? I suppose her argument will be that it's a matter of the paradox of intolerance. You have to she's sort of reformulated Popper, right? To be like, you have to dominate the dominant. Don't dominate anyone except I guess. Oh.